nutrition. This is a big one, and it is often a challenging one. And today, as I kind of deep dive into a couple of concepts here, I'm going to be very vulnerable and kind of just open to this truth that as a health professional and, been helping many men and women through their health journey and just helping them release weight, build muscle, just be overall healthy. Nutrition is a challenging component because it doesn't always work across the board perfectly for everyone. And I want to disclose something here as I getting transparent. One of the most challenging parts um, as a health professional in the realm of nutrition is that this is the hardest component to really pinpoint for everyone across the board. Because today we're going to talk about scientifically how we attain or achieve weight release for those that are looking to achieve that at the beginning of this year, or even to build muscle or to achieve both. Is it even possible to achieve both at the same time? And so when we're looking at all of the methodologies that are out there, or even the methodologies that tend to be the better choices, they don't work perfectly. Okay. And I really want to establish this because there's a lot of misinformation out there that says if you follow this perfectly, you're going to get the answers to all of the things that you're needing, or you're going to get all of the results that you desire. And that's partially true because there's never a set formula that is going to guarantee. And that is a word right there. They all say you're going to be able to, it's going to work for you, but there's no guarantee of that. And I really want you to understand this from somebody that's been experienced in this area for over 16 years, helping people. It There's no guarantee. So then how do we achieve that? It's by understanding that there's always going to be fluctuations. And it's knowing that through this process, when we're talking about nutrition, a lot of it is going to have to be experimental, which means your part and being true to yourself through this process is absolutely critical, my friends, which means that it's going to take intentionality. It's going to take focus. It's going to take commitment. It's going to take discipline. It's going to take being intentional with everything that we are doing through this process, through this journey. And we got to be open to being flexible. We got to be open to trying things. We got to be open to exploring and looking at how does my body respond to certain foods? How does my body respond to being in a calorie deficit? How does my body respond when I increase slightly in calories? How does my body respond when I consume added sugar? How does my body respond to processed foods, to all of these things? Because all of those components influence your nutrition, and they influence in the outcome that we gain from these things, or the outcome that we ultimately see, which is why nutrition is complicated. And it's complicated. And when I say complicated, I don't want to discourage you. I don't want to even influence or affirm doubt as to why maybe today you're not seeing the results that you want to receive or that you want to start seeing. But it's complicated in the sense that everybody's body is different. Slight tongue twister there. We're all different, which means that it's important to understand our body. And this is how we can start to reduce the complexity of nutrition. It's by understanding our body. And the way we understand our body is by exploring, is by being open that as we're going through this nutrition process with you, we want to evaluate. We want to be observant. We want to be exploring. As we explore, we're being observant as to how our body is responding through the entire process. It is not just simply follow this nutrition program and now I'm not going to care. I'm not going to be I'm not going to be diligent as to observing what's happening, or I'm just not, I just don't care to learn. Just give me the formula and give me the recipe that gets me the results that I want. Because the truth is that when we're in any of the methodologies, whether you're dieting, right? That word is like it's a prohibited word. It's you can't say that word in the fitness culture, the health culture, and I believe that the stigma of dieting has been destroyed. But because when we're talking about dieting, I may use that word simply to reference nutrition concepts. Okay. I don't believe in the concept of living a diet life. But when we're talking about diet, it is simply referring to nutrition components or concepts that we may follow. Okay. It's our dieting, how we're eating, how we're intaking food, how are we in the process, or how are we, or what are we doing in the nutrition concept or aspect of our life that is going to reflect how we live, right? That's the dieting part. So, in all of these components or these methodologies, they all work. I also want to be transparent with that. They all work, whether you're in a paleo diet, whether you're in a keto diet, whether you're in a the Atkins diet, whatever it is in terms of diets, they work. Now, understand me this, because they work, they don't, it doesn't mean they're going to work a long term. And here's why. Anything that is causing you to be excessively restrictive and is not sustainable for your lifestyle. Because I have conversations with people that are still following many of these diets and they're able to, it is sustainable for them, and they're still seeing results today. The key here is understanding you and your lifestyle, which is why for many, they end up falling into the trap of yo-yo dieting, to where they try one, then they wing off it, or they just jump off it completely. They gain more weight. And I want to explain the reasons why that happens. And then they get back on another dieting program, another dieting methodology, and then it causes them to literally be in this yo-yo. But there's many that these diet forms are sustainable for them, because maybe they're okay with being restricted. They're okay with living off of certain types of foods only. They understand the reasons why they're doing it. They have a certain meaning and a purpose as to why they're doing it. For them, it works for them, and that's perfect. Which is why it's back to this point of understanding our body, understanding ourselves. For many years, and I would say for about 5 to 7 years of my life, not to stretch it too much, I literally ate the same food every single day. For many, that's completely impossible to do. But I understood that these foods, they were simple for me to cook. They tasted great because of how I made them. I would not get bored of it because I understood the principles of why I was making these food choices. And for me, it was more about the performance aspect of it than actually the pleasure side of things. Now, that might be too extreme for somebody, and that's okay. What we've got to understand is what is really truthfully sustainable for you. What is the meanings of why you follow or make the nutrition choices that you make? Because today I want to start with the very basics. I thought about giving everything in one session, really talking about why, when you're on a deficit for too long, we may have to introduce reverse dieting. We may have to introduce a couple of other components to kickstart your metabolism again, to get you back into a state of allowing more nutrients to come in to then get us ready to be able to go back into a deficit for those that are looking to release weight. I was thinking of doing it all in one, but it's going to be too much. So what I've decided to do is in the next few Fridays, we're going to really break down these components. And today I really want to just start with the basics, because I believe that I don't care where you're at in your nutrition process, we've got to go back to the basics. And we may have to just simply reevaluate and look at, am I following the basics? Because the basics are and should be the foundation to how we build our nutrition lifestyle. Because here, in all that I teach, it's really about that component, about the lifestyle component, about making sure that when we change or we're changing the way we're living, it is one able to be achieved with our life. So we've got to change the style of life and the way we're living to make sure that in every aspect of living healthy, we are on track. We have all those things in the places that they should be. They're in alignment so that we can achieve the ultimate goal here, which is to live a sustainable lifestyle of health, right? Health being the foundation piece, health being the overall component. Health is, if you do not want to live healthy, these Friday trainings may not be for you. If you do not want to live at your optimal and have the highest amount of energy and just be thriving at the highest possible peak of your life or for your life, then these Friday trainings might not be for you. But if you are and you want to be able to live healthy, then these Friday trainings are definitely for you, which is why moving in this direction on the nutrition side, we've got to go back and check and be honest and truthful to ourselves. I will always challenge you to be honest and truthful to yourself, because the only one that is going to be affected by living untruthful is yourself. We got to go back and be honest and check in and look at, am I really making the best choices in terms of my nutrition that I should be or that I could be? If these basics aren't there, when we need to go back to making sure that those basics are there so that we can then start to build off of a strong foundation, because otherwise we're going to start to have a building that is not going to be as strong, but it's going to start to tilt. And then it can cause us to be in a very vulnerable position to maybe fall off and give up health as a whole. Many stories of many people, the reason they fall off of their health and of living healthy is because this nutrition component was never truly firmly established. They were chasing results by chasing diets that were unsustainable. They didn't know why they were doing it. They didn't understand the components, which is why I believe it's important for us to be able to be independent with our health. And how do we do that? It's by learning, by taking in this information that I'm sharing. It's by gaining the knowledge and the insight as to why we're doing what we're doing. If we're simply doing something because they're telling us to do it, well, that might be good because we'll get certain temporary results at the beginning. But if we don't know why we're doing it and don't know how to make adjustments with what we're doing, then when that person is no longer there, or when what is told doesn't work anymore, we're going to be stuck and we're going to live frustrated. So, nutrition components to the basics. Let's deep dive and let's jump in. It's about the choices that we make should be nutritional dense foods or nutrient dense food, which means that we should be eating the majority of our foods should be whole foods. The American standard diet is failing and has failed us as Americans, as a country, because it's created on the idea of making or providing high calorie nutrient foods at a very low cost. So meaning, let's give them things that have high calories but very little nutrients. Absolutely no nutritional value, which is why processed foods are so readily available. You look at a grocery store, probably about 30% of the foods there are whole foods. They're nutrition dense foods. Everything else in the middle aisles, in the middle section, and the frozen foods are all, if not all, processed or highly processed foods that contain added sugars and high sodium, not to mention other chemicals that can produce cancers, that can produce a bunch of other diseases. So we've got to evaluate ourselves. There's people that I know that the foods, they have more food in their pantry and freezer than they do in the regular refrigerator section of their fridge. And they're living off of those foods. That is destructive. That is a nutrition life that we should not have, or is not recommended for us to have, because there's no nutritional value. And the basis of all of health is, in terms of nutrition, is that the foods that we consume are going to make up who we are. They're going to make up our our health, but also make up who we become in terms of identity, in terms of physicality. And my battery is going to die. Baby, can you please get my battery back? The benefits of being married and having somebody to help and having a supporter there on your side. You can run and grab your charger when needed. But the basis of all things is nutrition. It's about the foods that we are consuming. And there should be one right there. These are live, as you can see. They're not mocked. All right, cool. We're good. Thank you so much, babe. So that means that we need to be aware of the choices or the nutrients that we are taking in. Because the way our body functions, the way our body, our metabolism functions, the way we absorb things, the way our cells function, the way blood flows, circulation, the way the organs function, the way we physically are able to move, the way our brain functions. Oh my goodness, that's a whole other topic. All of these components are influenced by what we consume, by the foods we take in, by the nutrients we are giving it. When we give food or intake food, what happens is that it sends information to our body. And based on the information that is being sent is how our body is going to function. If we start to, based on the foods that we're giving our body, we start to send information that can cause blood flow to be impacted, that can cause inflammation to happen in our body, that can cause excess body fat to build, that can cause our heart to not be functioning or pumping as much blood because of what's surrounding it, meaning an excess amount of fat. If the information that is being sent is causing insulin to be spiking all the time, meaning we're over consuming sugar, if all of those information is being sent to our body, well, our body is going to start to be affected. Our health is going to be affected. And what we have to know is that oftentimes this doesn't happen overnight. This happens through an abusive and an unhealthy relationship with food through a prolonged period of time. So what we need to do is know that when I am consuming foods, yes, I'm seeing the effects of it now, but I'm seeing the repercussions of it long term, the repercussions of it long term. So what I do today, the choices I'm making today are influencing the way I perform today, but they are crafting and shaping my future. So we've got to evaluate the food choices that we're making and understand that the choices we should be making should be in line with nutritious, dense foods. They should provide adequate amount of nutrients to our body. So we need to look at today, what food choices am I making? Which means that they should consist of 4 components. They should consist of high nutrients, a nutritious dense protein, a nutritious dense carbohydrate that is not a high glycemic carb, meaning it doesn't turn into sugar fast, which means that these carbs should have some form of fiber in them, because fiber is going to ensure that the sugar, because all carbohydrates are sugar, they're a form of sugar, which means that they are a form of energy supply for our body. The number one choice of energy that our body likes and that it was basically created to function on was through sugar, through glucose. And that glucose is what gives us the energy. However, here is where we've got to be intentional and we've got to understand this component. It's not just simply about consuming sugar or glucose. And you've noticed that when you eat sugar, what happens? You get this boost of energy. The problem is when we are consuming sugars that are added sugars, that are processed sugars, that are not nutritious dense sugars in the sense of like a fruit or like of a sweet potato, or things that they have a sugar component in them, but they have a higher component of fiber in them. The fiber is what helps it not turn into sugar in our bloodstream so quickly, which means that the amount of energy that we supply our body is dispersed slower. I had a conversation with my sister yesterday, and she says, I started eating potato in the morning. I'm no longer eating oatmeal. But I noticed that the moment I eat potato with my eggs, I get hungry really, really fast. Why is that? To where when I used to eat the oatmeal, I wouldn't get as hungry. Well, because a potato has higher levels of starch, meaning that it has a higher levels of sugar. When we eat that, it hits our bloodstream faster, which means it turns into energy faster. It runs into our bloodstream, has sugar faster, which is why her body is now using that energy so fast and she's getting hungry faster. To where in the opposite of an oatmeal, it has the density of it is a higher dense of fiber. So yes, in the body, it has sugar because it is a carbohydrate, but because the higher density is of fiber, it turns into sugar fat at a slower rate, which means it's absorbed in our bloodstream a little bit slower because of the fiber. The fiber is what helps it not turn into sugar faster. So when we're looking at the food choices that we're making, specifically on the second note of complex carbs or whole carbs, we want to make sure that they are leaning more towards or primarily on the low glycemic side. And all of this information, it's impossible for me to give you all of those details here, but simply Google this: high glycemics versus low glycemic. And our carbohydrate intake should be on the lower glycemic side primarily. And I recommend always, we're going to get better nutrients, which is going to give us a better sustainable energy, which is going to help us feel better. Number 3, it should have essential fats. And again, the key word here, essential. Look up essential fats and look at what food choices are within that. And having adequate amount of essential fats is going to help us, because we need fat to protect our organs. We need fat for absorption of certain nutrients. They help carry the absorption process in our body. And then number 4, we want to have extra layers of fiber, or in what's labeled as vegetable, right? Because again, it's to get the vitamins, to get the nutrients, the adequate vitamins from some of these foods, right? So this is a foundation of our foods. And the one thing we want to evaluate and we really want to eliminate from our nutrition life is added sugars, my friend. Added sugar in the form of processed sugars, in the form of look at the foods that you're consuming. If it says added sugars, look at how much of it is added sugar. We've got to keep our added sugar intake low because there's no nutritional value in there. It gives us energy, it spikes us, but then comes hard of the crash. So we want to look at what is my consumption of added sugar. If that is so, meaning even in processed foods, because processed foods have added sugar. Frozen foods have added sugar. Most fried foods, the batter or what they're using has added sugar. So added sugar is one thing, one component right off the bat that we've got to eliminate. Now, it is hard for many to do that. Why? Because sugar is highly addictive. So when we've been on sugar, added sugars for a long period of time, the moment we start to get off of it, we start to get withdrawals. We start to get urges, cravings that are unbearable sometimes, that would just say, you know what, screw this, I'm going to eat some of it. Or they deceive themselves and they start to mix added sugars when they're either on a diet or they're following a specific nutrition program or they're following some just nutritional alternative. And when that happens, we start to defeat the purpose of really the nutrition life that we are wanting to build. Sugar is highly, highly destructive, which is why we need to be honest with ourselves. If today you're in a process of releasing weight and maybe you're following a calorie deficit or you're in some type of diet, you're following some type of diet methodology. Calorie deficit meaning you're just consuming less calories than you are using per day. When we're looking at the science of getting results to release weight, well, it's about calories in and calories out, right? Now, it's just not that simple, because I want to share with you a couple of factors that can influence, and calories meaning energy, okay? Calories that we consume become energy. And that is what our body uses to function. Each cell uses 1 calorie to function, right? Or 1 kcal, meaning 1 kilocalorie. So in that is we also need to be consuming an adequate amount to make sure that our cells are functioning. It's keeping us alive. Now, when we're looking at calories in versus calories out, the scientific term or the scientific understanding or terminology of either to gain or to lose or to maintain or release weight, it's if we're consuming more calories than we are using throughout the day, what do you think is going to happen? We're going to gain. If we're consuming less than what we're using, well, we should release. And if we're containing and we're consuming the amount that our body is, the adequate amount that our body is needing, then we should maintain. That's in theory. Now, there are factors that start to influence some of these things. And the moment that we start to get into a calorie deficit, meaning I'm going to reduce the amount of food that I intake versus the amount of energy that I'm using that I need to function, whether that is functioning at rest, which is known as our basal metabolic rate, our BMR, meaning how many calories does my body need? How much energy does it need to simply at rest function and keep me alive? And that would be sleeping, that would be sitting, right? Just at rest. Determining that, and there's a lot of calculators out there. There's some great resources that we can utilize to determine what that is. I'll leave one in the description. Once I post this on my YouTube channel, I'll leave in the description there one that can help you calculate that. But even still, it's simply a calculation. It's not an exact measure. It's hard to be precise and exact because there's a lot of other factors that come into play, into energy in and energy out, right? Calories in and calories out. So let's look at what are some of these factors? What are some of these things that influence that? Because again, as we start to gain this information, we can evaluate and look at, okay, are some of these factors now playing into my life? Can some of these factors be playing in? And based on that, can we make some adjustments? Because everything about life is about adjustments, my friend. There's never one straight across complete perfect program or nutrition that you can follow, nutrition life plan that you can follow that will work always perfectly, forever perfectly. Because there's so many factors that change. Our body changes. The absorption of how our body takes certain things is going to change. Age influences. So many things. Hormones influence. Gut health influence, right? So it's about being able to make these adjustments and make these tweaks. And the problem is that most people aren't willing to do that. And this is the component piece that is missing, that is not spoken about in the health space. It's just, oh, you just haven't found the right diet. No, that's not the case. The problem here is that as humans in this area, oftentimes we see it as like, oh my gosh, it's so complicated. Oh my gosh, I don't want to do it. I don't know what to do. But look, when we evaluate and look at life, everything is about adjustment. You've made adjustments your entire life. From the moment you were a preteen to a teen to a woman, there were a lot of adjustments that happened that we learned to do, right? So with this information that I share, my goal is to help you learn to how can we start to make then some adjustments so that we can start getting where we want to get to. But here's the thing, my friends, it takes intentionality. And we've got to be intentional about it. It takes us. It takes you. It takes your full attention. The reason why most people fall off and give up on their nutrition is because they're not giving it full or the attention it requires or the attention it needs. And if we're not willing to, then we're going to stay stuck because the choices that we made prior to being where we're at today is what caused us to be in the life that we're at today. And it was a period of time. It wasn't overnight. Which means it's going to take some time to get us back to where we need to get to, which means we've got to be flexible and we've got to be okay with this process, meaning we have to find joy in this process because a lot of times it may not be exciting or joyful. But if we can find the meaning and we can find the why as to why we're doing this and we're sticking to this and we're desiring and willing to be intentional and putting attention to the choices and what I am doing in terms of my nutrition, well, we can find that joy to get us to the life that we want. But it takes us, meaning I'm going to be committed and intentional about this entire process and the choices that I'm making. It's not about perfection. Never did I use that word. So for those critical thinkers that your brain takes it right away, well, that means I have to be perfect, but it's impossible to be perfect. It's not about perfection. It's about allowing ourselves grace and knowing that as I start to change my identity, meaning these choices that I'm making, I understand why I'm making. I understand why I'm committing to this nutrition. I understand why I'm saying no to these foods because I get to say no because these are not part of my identity of who I want to be. Therefore, I am able to gain the self-control to say no to sugar, to say no to added sugars, to say no to processed foods, to say no to fried foods, to say no to those Oreos that are speaking your name, or to say no to that chocolate, or to say no to whatever it is tugs at you and pulls at you that you say you can't stop eating, or that you say you can't control. In this state, in this place, we can gain control because we have the ability to have self-control and gain control over these things. Now, for those, empathetically, I say, for those that are in a state of I just can't, they just consume me. Well, we're in another level. We're in another category, right? We may need to evaluate and look at sugar addiction and food addictions and binging addictions and overeating addictions. And I say this respectfully with no shame or judgment at all, whether there's stress eating, emotional eating, or whatever that is, there is also a solution for that. And in that, we use the food behavior quadrant to help you, a 4-step process that I put together to really help you take back control of your food choices and take back control of your choice, take back control of you and your body. The moment we jump into any diet methodology, any process that we're following, the moment we start to mix and bring in certain things, it starts to impact us very aggressive, heavily, which means that if we go into a calorie deficit, whether that is 300, 400, 500 calories less than what your body needs based on BMR, your basal metabolic rate, again, how much energy or calories your body needs to keep you alive, and your activity level, right? There's a formula using the Harris formula that helps us evaluate based on your current activity level. It's going to give us a certain calorie number. Okay. We have people that want to understand what that calorie intake is. Now, we gotta look at when we're in a calorie deficit, we've got to understand that we're literally we're depleting our body. Now, we've got to be able to evaluate and look at, well, what is truly sustainable for me? How does my body react and function when I start to go through a deficit? Because sometimes people just do not function. They don't function correctly with a deficit because their body can go quickly into a starvation mode, which means that our body now will start to hold on to food because it's scared. If it recognizes there's a scarcity. So if we notice that, our body may start to shut down in the sense that it will not respond. Which is why we've got to be able to put attention to. If we notice that as I start to reduce my calorie intake, my body starts to just shut down, meaning it does not start to respond properly. I have excessively low energies. My body components are starting to speak, meaning I start to get excessive amounts of headaches. I start to get excessive amounts of jitters. I start to get excessive amounts of fatigue. We then need to evaluate and look at, okay, maybe I've gone a bit too low. I might need to increase. So we have the calorie component side, which I really want to get into this more next week. And then we have the measuring of this component utilizing another system, which tends to be better and healthier for people to sustain in terms of understanding how much food to consume, is really by using our hand. The hand measuring technique, right? Which I want to go into heavier on next week. Many of you know this already. You can look this up. This isn't something I invented. I'm just here to bring you the information, okay? So when we find ourselves in a calorie deficit, if we start to mix in, meaning I'm now reducing my amount of calories and I'm going to lean on nutritious dense foods, but then I occasionally start going back the other way, meaning I start to just going to take I'm going to have a little bit of chocolate. I'm going to have a little bit of this sweet. I'm going to have a little bit more chips. I'm going to have a little bit of processed foods, meaning I'm going to go out occasionally. And that's where this cheat meal mentality, which is why I hate that concept and I hate cheat meals, because we're literally cheating ourselves. And if we start to do that, look, the moment we do that once, it then starts to be something we can tend to lean on and do more often. And the problem with that is that it doesn't take very much food to add up those calories to then cause us to be over the intended amount that we said we were going to target to do to really keep us in a deficit to really see the result. And we tend to focus on, yeah, but I did 4 days at a really strict, consistent, low deficit. And we only focus on that, but we don't recognize that one day, even 2 days can cause us to wean off. Now, that is the cause of calorie deficits, right? Anytime we're looking to release weight, being in a calorie deficit, my friends, look, it takes discipline. It takes being intentional, and it takes understanding why we're doing this, which is why identifying, having an intrinsic motivation is absolutely crucial, because it's not simple. If we've ate a certain way all our life, and then all of a sudden we're introduced this new way, which is linked to a new lifestyle, which is linked to basically helping us, because look, we don't have to live this way forever, which is the other component that I want to introduce. That if we've been in a deficit and we've released a lot of weight, well, then how we may be afraid of like gaining that back. So how do we safely get back into a maintaining approach, a maintaining way? That is something that we're really going to deep dive. But the problem is that when we're in this place, we've got to be willing to understand that in this deficit, it is to help us get to where we need to get to release weight. It's not necessarily enjoyable. It's not necessarily pleasing. Now, for many, sometimes it doesn't mean getting you into a calorie deficit, because maybe today you might be eating very little food and you're still gaining. Well, then that means your metabolism is completely shot. And we actually need to do the opposite. We need to start consuming more food, but more of the right foods to help kickstart the metabolism process again in your body, to help get your body to absorb and actually start using energy versus being shut down in a protective starvation mode, so that we can then start to get to the results, right? So again, this information that I share, it's all about evaluating and looking at, where am I? Where are you today? Because if you're overeating, if you're over consuming, overfeeding, then we've got to reduce that to help you get back control of your life, to get you to be healthy. And now, if you've been in a calorie deficit for a long period of time, then we may need to evaluate and look at, okay, maybe this is just no longer sustainable for my body. We may need to introduce more food, which is the reverse or the refeeding part, to help us get back into a state where our body starts to absorb, take in more energy, start using more of the energy, to then get us to a place to where in time we can then go back into a deficit to start getting a higher level of results, right? Again, this is back to, I say all this because this takes us back to how I opened up today's topic, in that it takes trying, exploring, and seeing how our body responds. Now, before I end, I did want to share some of the factors that influence Remember we talked about uh, um, calories in versus calories out, meaning energy in and energy out. That is known as, well, energy balance, right? So what are some of these factors in energy in the consuming, in the bringing in of energy, in calories in? Well, one of that is appetite, right? And this is influenced by hormones that regulate appetite and being satiated or feeling full. And in there is the leptin hormone that literally sends us the signal that tells us, no, I'm full, I'm satisfied, stop, I don't need any. But that tends to be lost. It no longer has the ability to regulate because we've ignored it for too long. And this is for those that deal with overeating, they overfeed, they've just been constantly over consuming calories, which has led to weight gain. And in that, we need to look at, okay, this is a factor that influences how much I'm consuming. So I need to pay attention to that. I need to be intentional about how I'm eating and what foods or how much I'm saying yes to, and put a limit on that, which is why a recommended measure is to look at 80% full. Never eating till you're full. Because when we get to that fullness, we're over bloated. And then on top of that, we don't even know what that is really like. We tend being bloated and feeling heavy and full is actually full. No, we've gone too far. It's about being satisfied. And oftentimes is we never know what that's like because we've never paid attention. We've never really stopped and asked ourselves and evaluated, how do I feel? We go to a restaurant, they give us this plate of food, and we feel that we believe that because they gave it to us on our plate, we need to eat all of it. Well, the way we can start to gauge that and evaluate that to take control of appetite is eat about half of it and then stop. Allow our body to really take in that food and start slowly going through that digestive process. And then ask yourself, how do I feel? Do I feel good? Am I about 80% full? Do I feel satisfied? If so, then we stop. We can say no. We don't have to eat everything on the food. Another good tidbit that we can do to help regulate is drink 8 ounces of water before you actually start eating. What is that going to do? Well, it's going to help us give us that sensation of satisfaction of being a bit full, so that when we start eating, well, we don't, again, we're able to help us regulate, right? So factors of energy and appetite. Number 2, food consumed, right? It's influenced by, again, it could be availability, it could be energy density, it could be your sleep quality. If you're sleeping less, you're going to want to eat more food to help you stay awake. So we need to look at that. Recommended 6 to 8, more leaning on the 8. Lack of sleep and sleep quality has also been a prime indicator of causing people to become overweight. Your status, your culture also influences the food consumed, right? Meaning what types of foods that you eat based on your culture, based on the influences around you, which again, it all leads us back to our relationship with food. Number 3, calories absorbed. This is influenced by macronutrient intake, by food prep, by age, personal health status, and even energy status. How much of the calories that we're consuming are actually being absorbed by the body. So that influences that. And then psychological factors, meaning influenced by stress levels, your mindset, how you are perceiving food, your understanding and your psychological relationship and understanding of food, control, self-esteem, and again, sleep quality also influences the psychological factor. Right? So evaluate that. Because some of these things might today be hindering or be influencing how much food you are consuming, how much food you're intaking. Emotions. not having control of our emotions, right? Which leads us to emotional eaters, stress eaters, right? Using food for things that it wasn't solely intended for. Can it help us feel a little bit better? Can it bring certain joy? Can it make us be happy? Yes, but when we're going to those foods simply for that is where the problem can start to occur. Now, let's look at factors that influence energy out, meaning the use of it, right? Energy burned at rest, being your BMR. And this is influenced by body size, hormonal status, your history of dieting, genetic factors, health status, sleep quality, and age. So maybe you recognize that you would eat the normal amounts of foods and like you would burn, you wouldn't gain. But as you started to get a little bit older, you notice that, yeah, I can't use the same amount of food. I can't consume the same amount of food. Well, that's because you don't burn the same amount of energy at rest. Hormones that change, right? This is a big conversation with women. Before menopause, their body is different. Once menopause hits, they start to see a slowdown in their metabolism. And there's factors and ways around all that, right? Energy burned through exercise. We don't burn the same amount of energy through exercise. This is influenced by exercise ability, intensity, duration, frequency, the type, the environment, as well as hormonal status and sleep quality. So if we're looking at that energy out component, these, how we're exercising or the way we're exercising can also influence that. Energy burned by non-exercise activity. We've talked about NEAT, right? Non-exercise activity thermogenesis, meaning our regular, consistent movement throughout the day. That is one thing we want to increase. Why? Because that takes up more calories. It's a bigger part of our life than if we're only focusing on intentional exercise and sleep, or even the digestive process. And then the last one here, or let's look at this one. It's influenced by health status, energy status, very similar to exercise, stress levels, hormonal status, occupation, leisure activities, and genetic factors. And occupation is a big one. If we live a very sedentary life, well, this energy out is going to be influenced tremendously. And then the last one, energy burned by metabolizing food. This is influenced by macronutrients makeup and how processed the food is. To get to metabolize the food, it's based on what types of foods we're consuming. Because if we're consuming high levels of processed or high amounts of processed food, well, it's really not going to metabolize food. It's really not going to be used because it's pure sugar. Majority of that is going to be stored. It's going to become fat. It's going to be stored as fat. And the reason that is we have insulin being a fat storing hormone. The more that insulin is firing, it's going to, whatever your body doesn't use, well, it's going to store the rest of it as fat. So we've got to evaluate and start looking at, are some of these factors influencing today? Are they impacting? Are they causing me to be stuck in my nutrition? And the simple way to start evaluating, start breaking it down, well, on the appetite side of how much I'm consuming, right? Can I make an adjustment there? Can I measure and stop myself when I'm eating? Can I not fill my plate up so much when I'm about to eat a meal? On the food consumed, well, can I make better choices on the foods? Can I lean towards nutritious, dense foods? Can I adjust my sleep? Can I make adjustments to how I'm currently living? Right? So all of this, my friends, we're really going to break down in the next couple of Fridays. There's just a lot. And I really want to take time to help us get to a place where I have a bit more insight. And again, this isn't something that maybe we can learn in just a free Friday training, right? This is really to also invite you that as you gain information, let's keep on gaining more information, searching specifically with what I'm talking about, or utilizing me to help you through this process. Let's ask questions. Bring those questions, right? Send them to me. You can send your questions to my email, david@davidhernandez.co, david@davidhernandez.co. Let's have a conversation. Maybe jump on a free 10, 15-minute conversation and answer those questions in private if they're real personal questions. Or we can even talk about how you can join one of my group coachings and really look at how we can guide you specifically by evaluating where you're at and really looking at this, right? But here, next week, we're really going to start looking at if we've been in a dieting process, if that could be calorie deficit, that could be keto diet, that could be some type of restrictive form of nutrition that we've been following. And restrictive just meaning that I'm restricting myself in terms of how much I am consuming, right? I might be consuming less than what I am exerting. So if that is, and maybe today you find yourself that you're a bit stuck, you're not seeing results, well, one, I encourage you, are we being true to ourselves? Are we really committing to that deficit? One, that's the first thing we need to evaluate. And are we being consistent with it, steady? Because oftentimes, look, when we're in this journey, it takes a little bit of time. At the beginning, we may start to see some tremendous results. Why? Because that's just our body releasing a lot of waste. A lot of it can be body weight, water weight, not body weight, water weight, and waste. Then there might be a little hiccup there where we need to stay at it and we need to be more disciplined to then be able to get to the level of starting to burn some of that fat. And if maybe you've been doing that for a while, you have been consistent, you have been committed, you have been true to yourself, you have been steady, you haven't been going off and consuming processed foods and maybe over consuming sugars and then expecting that we should still see results. It's like the analogy that I use of a water bucket. You fill up a bucket of water to the top, you leave it outside in the sun. Throughout the week, throughout the day, throughout the week, it starts to go down, it starts to go down, it starts to go down. And if, let's say, the goal is to be a certain amount down by the end of the week, and then on Saturday, you come in and you fill it back up to the top, and then you go out Sunday afternoon and you say, well, why didn't it go down? Well, it's because we filled it up again on Saturday. And that's what sometimes happens when we're on this deficit. One day, if we eat some brownie and some cookies, or we're snacking throughout the day and don't even recognize we're consuming 50 to 100 calories extra, and that could just be 1 tablespoon of peanut butter. That now each day, at the end of the week, that can be anywhere from, if we're doing a 5-day period, anywhere from 100 to 500 extra calories. Or in one day, we overconsume, that would be the equivalent of filling up that bucket of water to the top again. And then we're expecting on Monday, when we go see and evaluate our results, we don't see the results, right? And we get frustrated. So it's really, it takes discipline, my friends, but I'm here to guide you and let you know that, look, it's possible. It's possible. We can get there. And if you have been good following these diets and then you're just still stuck, well, we're going to introduce something that's known in the fitness industry as reverse dieting. And I want to just throw that out there. You guys can look some of that up, because it's really not about me inventing new information. It's about just simply sharing insight information that I've experienced with others that can help, and based on my own information and research that I'm doing as well, right? So the goal here is to help, to just bring some insight that will help you take control of your health in a smart and better way. Because remember, it's about the 3 S's in a simple, smart, and sustainable way. My friends, thank you so much. It's always a joy to be here. If you have any questions, send those to david@davidhernandez.co, david@davidhernandez.co. And if you haven't already subscribed to my YouTube channel, you can watch this replay. If you want to go back and rewatch it, you can watch it on my YouTube channel. The link will be there down in the description as well. My friends, I love you. Take care. Have a good day, and we'll talk soon. Remember, you are incredible. Go out, crush it, and live your best life. I'll see you. Peace.